continue to give. I had been retired long enough where if you have 2 agenda items in a day, it's a very full day. And so I was ready to jump back in. And fortunately, the school board is not a paid position, so I could continue to give to the community of Las Cruces. That was a joke. And so as a school board member, I would like to talk briefly about 2 or 3 issues with you. Maybe touch on critical race theory, because that's always fun. Talk about challenges to books that are going on across the country, however briefly, introduce that topic into our discussion. And I am the first openly LGBTQ member of the Las Cruces School Board. And so if I have a little bit of time, I would like to address that issue as well with you. So that's plenty of too much time. The critical race theory, though, probably deserves no less than 2 minutes. That was also a joke. It is so hard to have a reasonable conversation about critical race theory with so many people in our society today, because it has been used as a marshalling cry to rally the troops that they're doing something wrong in our schools. And so if I polled the group what critical race theory is, I'm not sure what I would get in terms of answers even from you. I have an assumption that you are more educated, and that's just an assumption, that you read and read extensively. But there are many people in our society who look at critical race theory as trying to make little white girls feel bad about being white. And they pull those emotional strings when they talk about critical race theory. And so mothers feel like, and fathers feel like, well, that's wrong. My kid shouldn't feel bad about it. Critical race theory in its origin came out of critical legal studies. And it had to do with the systemic in our society, part of the very fabric of it, racism that is built in to America. A little white girl who learns about slavery might feel a little bad about the slaves. I would hope so. That was a bad time. Now, I don't know guilt. How much guilt does she feel? When you're a kid about that, she could take on some guilt that I was white and people in the past were slaves, and therefore I am somehow responsible. I don't know that that's a bad thought to have crossed her head. I know when I was doing research on my genealogy and found out that the will that one of my ancestors wrote in 1794 in South Carolina left slaves to his wife and his daughter, it hit me across the head, because then it became a real thing to me in terms of my own family. Because I'd grown up with a Texas grandfather and an Oklahoma grandfather, but did not have any sense of that history, that within our own family, slavery was one of the issues. And so when we confront those things in our own lives, I think it becomes more personal to us. So critical race theory, into our system of society, we have built racist things. Do any of you know, wave at me if you know Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun? Anybody? Janet, you remember the play? It was first produced in 1959. Now, if I asked how many of you remembered Sidney Poitier and Ruby Dee, would I get some waving at me? Okay. The film that came out in 1961, based on Lorraine Hansberry's play, the film was a nice adaptation of it. And it talked about the family moving to Chicago. They had their $10,000 check. They were rich from the father's insurance after his death. And they bought a house in the part of Chicago where they were not supposed to have bought a house. And so you can imagine the white realtor, the white community association member coming and trying to buy them out. and the struggles that the family faced in terms of race that way. And I've taught that play in the high school. And when I taught it, I would talk about redlining. I never had the kids do research, but if we were doing critical race theory, if you will, then in high school, a kid could look up the redlining that took place in Chicago. And you could see very clearly that the green sections on that map were the most desirable white sections. The blue sections were still fine. You got to watch out for the yellow sections on the map because that's white working class and might include, oh my gosh, Southern Europeans. And then the redlining kept neighborhoods with the highest interest rates and the lowest economic opportunities. Built into our very system was racism. And so we use that terminology incorrectly today just to mean anything that is taught in a school, because we don't teach critical race theory in our school. I told you it comes out of legal issues. And so when we confront racism in school, though, what we want to be able to talk about is, wasn't slavery wrong? Yes. Wasn't it, if you're teaching an elementary school lesson, wasn't it wrong that some people couldn't buy houses in some neighborhoods because of the color of their skin? And an elementary kid could go, yes, that is correct. And then a high school kid could actually look at the redlining maps and figure out what was going on in the context of a play. And then I would be having them write critical analyses of literature and trying to keep David from interacting too much with Eileen. And so there's a brief talk about critical race theory. I'd like to open it up to discussion when we're ready. If you have any questions about what we can do, or brainstormed ideas, what we can do in Las Cruces to make sure that the people who are shouting critical race theory at the rest of us are not holding the floor, that the truth will get out about what that was. I would like to right now into the chat just put a definition of critical race theory from the Encyclopedia Britannica for you. And so if you would like to access that, I'm not sure how our computer savvy are. You could go back and forth between that top paragraph of what critical race theory is, and then back and forth to the Zoom. May I move on to the to book burning, or should I stop and answer a question? David, what's the best format? Just keep going? Okay, then tell me, what's your knowledge of book burning in New Mexico? Give me a wave of your hand, either technologically with that little reaction thing, or a real hand, which is what I would do. How many of you are aware of any book burning or book banning stories in New Mexico, specifically New Mexico? That takes place somewhere else. We don't do that in New Mexico. You know, there is a lot of truth to that. And thank our lucky stars, we are not living in Florida. Okay, I said that, I meant it. In Alamogordo, just one generation back in 2001, there was a preacher there, Jack Brock, I believe his name, who not having read the Harry Potter books, but knowing that Harry Potter must be satanic and the children would all want to become witches, led a book burning in that community. I am proud to say that across the street there were hundreds of people who were protesting that book burning. And so you can see from that, it's ignorance that makes that part of the pastor's approach to it, not having read the books, having no idea what it was about. J.K. Rowling said that she never had any little girl or little boy come up to her and say, I'm so glad I read your books because now I know how to be a witch. You know, that was not what those books were about, but things can be willfully misinterpreted that way. Do you guys know where Bloomfield is? Way to go, Janet. I like your head going no. Janet goes, maybe, I've heard of it. Bloomfield's up there near Farmington, near Aztec, in that part of our state. If I said Rodolfo Anaya's name to you, would you nod your head? Yes, I know him. I have read Bless Me Ultima or Tortugas or any of those books. Rodolfo Anaya is was one of our treasures in New Mexico as an author, and his book Bless Me Ultima has been taught throughout our state and thankfully now throughout the nation. But it was back in 1981 when the Bloomfield School District banned that book. They were doing a cultural awareness thing by having the book in there. The school board member, who was maybe concurrently or later a New Mexico state senator to our roundhouse, led the books outside and burned them. And that was the last time before that we had had a book banning in New Mexico. There are other instances. Have you read, if I said Holden Caulfield's name, would Catcher in the Rye come to mind? Oh yeah, we don't like that book. Bad, bad, bad. Burn that thing. And that just takes place nationwide. It's mostly the profanity, I think. In Bloomfield, when the book was burned, it was because of its, well, there is profanity for sure in there, but it was because Tony interacts with a curandera, a healer, and there is that element of witchcraft that people read into it, which for some reason makes people's knees jerk when they listen to books. The book was banned in Colorado not too far after that, 1981, but it was because they could read the Spanish profanity. Usually that book makes it under the radar in terms of profanity because everything, the profane words, excuse me, the obscene words are in Spanish. You would also be happy to know that Carlsbad banned the Merriam-Webster dictionary at one point. That dictionary can be an evil, evil book. That was back in the 80s as well. And it was because they defined words in that book that we don't want to see. So defining an obscenity made that whole book not acceptable. Have you heard of the book Mouse, the graphic novel about the Holocaust? Yes. Okay. Dave's giving a thumbs up. Susan, you've heard of it. I see head shaking. Mouse won the Pulitzer Prize. If that says anything to you, the first graphic novel to ever do so. And by graphic novel, what I mean is comic book, right? Except not really. It is a novel where in novel form with a dialogue essentially, but drawings that go with it. Now, when you were kids, did you read comic books? Oh, please shake your head. Yes, I hope so. Otherwise, your lives were incomplete. Annette, your life was incomplete. I'm kidding. And so you can hook kids in with graphic novels, and that's one of them. And it was in the 8th grade curriculum in the McGinn County, Tennessee School District. Did you guys follow this story? It just happened in January of this year. I will give you a link to the school board transcript because when I went back, I was just astonied. And when I went back to read it, I was even more astonied about what on earth they were thinking. Mouse depicts, it's set during the Holocaust. You can well imagine it might depict some unpleasant circumstances. And when I read the transcript, thank you, Annette. I like to be understated sometimes. And so when I read the transcript, they were just overly concerned with the word damn, with the word bitch. There were depictions of nude animals. I've got some nude dogs running around the house right now. And it was just beyond the pale to see why they could ban that book. But school boards are doing that. And I think I told, let me check my time. I think I told you I also like to touch on LGBTQ issues if you would like to hear a couple things there. Let me put a couple more links in the chat while I'm doing this, just so you can have those if you are interested in following up. And that would be the something about redlining in Chicago, and then also the link to the McGinn County School District meeting. Now, when I looked it up this morning, I found it on, somebody had transcribed it onto their website, the Comic Something site. When I looked it up in January, I went to the McGinn website to read it, and I think they've just faithfully reproduced it there for us. Okay, transition. I said I'd like to talk briefly about LGBTQ rights as well, and identified that I'm the first LGBTQ member of the school board. Well, I don't know if that's true, but I'm the first openly LGBTQ member of that school board. I do not want to presume what people have come before me have thought about. Never mind. So we have recently passed in Las Cruces a gender inclusive policy. Give me a wave if you are familiar with that. Gender inclusive policy. We've got a couple people. It is was policy JBD is how it is known. J because it has to do with students. B because it's the subcategory B of section J, and D because it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th policy in that grouping. So JBD means nothing in terms of the letters themselves, but the gender inclusive policy was the 4th in that series. And I was very proud of our school district. They were in the works of our school board. They were in the works already to implement this right in the middle of times where you see in Texas that our governor there wants to make it child abuse for parents who talk to their kids about being transgender. In Florida, are you familiar with the Don't Say Gay bill that is going on there? Yeah, it's a catchy way to talk about what that bill is so that people have, oh yes, I've heard of that. Did anybody watch the Saturday Night Live skit this last week with Kate McKinnon? Okay, she's a lesbian on that program, and it was just hysterical. Okay, and that's shaking her head because, of course, they use irony and satire for their making their point, and they make the point, and it's a sad one to us because how can you outlaw a group of children and their parents not be able to talk about them? But those are the issues that we're facing right now in our society. Let me have you watch a brief PSA message that the Movement Advancement Project has put together on transgender kids. And so into the chat, if I tried sharing this with you with a screen share, I would probably lose my internet. And so let me see. But I will try. If it doesn't work, then if it becomes garbled, then we'll figure out that it's not working. Are you looking at a YouTube screenshot? Say yes to me. Okay. And so I'd like to share with you a little public service announcement that the MAP resource people, the Movement Advancement Project, put together about transgender youth.
I'm a transgender girl. I know a lot of people have questions about what it means to be transgender. and I get that. What I tell them is I was born a boy, but inside I always knew I was female. With the support of my parents, I've transitioned to live every day as the girl I've always known myself to be. Every student should have a fair chance to do well in school, but forcing transgender kids like me into restrooms that don't match their gender identity means a lot more bullying and abuse. And forcing me to use a separate restroom from all the other kids makes me stand out and just makes it worse. School is already hard enough. Schools should protect kids from bullying. They shouldn't be passing policies that create or promote it. We all care about safety and privacy in restrooms. If I can't safely use the restroom, school becomes impossible. I just want a chance to learn, graduate, and make my family proud without having to be scared every time I do something as basic as using the restroom.
Were you able to watch that, or did it just go click, 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 click? Okay, you were able to. So let me into the chat also put a link to the transgender page of the map. So if you would like to, you can go back and look at that information as well. Do any of you know the Movement Advancement Project? Anybody? I didn't.
Chloe and Rennie went down the sand dunes.
We need a real adventure.
Make it real. Compare travel credit cards that help you book adventures beyond your backyard.
YouTube will continue to play. Yeah, if you don't just turn it all the way off. So I had, anybody familiar with Movement Advancement Project? I did not know them either, but a friend of mine was concerned about her granddaughter, whose name is now Chloe, not the name that she grew up with, but she's gone away to university and is a first-year student, I believe, and encountered some bullying. And Phyllis wanted to know, what can I do to support her? How can I help? And so I went to GLSEN, Gay Lesbian Educator, Straight Educator Network. When I sponsored the Gay Straight Alliance at Cruces High, that was definitely one of my resources. And went to the Human Rights Campaign for their information, sent that to her. Do any of you remember the It Gets Better campaign that Dan Savage and his partner started about 10 years ago? I should have these links for you too. It Gets Better was a great short video campaign. I recommended that Phyllis watch the one that President Obama did. It was 2012, and there were, I don't know if you're aware of the suicide rate of LGBTQ youth, but it is much higher than the rate of all youth. 41%, I believe it is, of transgender kids especially have contemplated suicide. Oh, thank you, Susan. Your face just tells me. It's just wrong and sad that we would persecute those kids rather than welcome and make them feel a part of our community. And so I sent those links to Phyllis to try to help her with, because she's constantly dead naming her grandchild in my presence. Well, not constantly, but when she does, she calls him by the name that she's used for 19 years. And it's very hard. You know, how can we be supportive to LGBTQ youth? What can we do to let them know that they are valid? And their feelings and concerns and what their belief system and who they are is a valid part of our community. Now, I think I'm speaking to a not just tolerant group as Unitarians, but a affirming and diversity accepting and inclusive group of people. That it's not, yes, it's not just, oh, look, there's a gay person in the room, I guess we'll have to put up with that. No, it is, come on in, welcome, have a seat, you are a part of who we are. And so how we get that message beyond the doors of the church and into our schools is a hard one, because we are not in the majority. Am I right when I said that? we have a very strong minority of people, very vocal, who are against LGBTQ inclusion, and so I've thrown that issue out too. Now, this was not just bifurcated, but trifurcated, I suppose. Talking critical race theory, talking book banning. What the hell? Let's just throw in the LGBTQ. But I wanted to share with you some things that I'm concerned about in our community, and give you the opportunity to have a forum to talk about any of these issues. Now, I know if we were going to search for Kevin Bacon in this room, we would have one degree, and we would figure out that we have mutual friends, because Catherine Massey is an important part of your community, isn't she? Yes, and she and I have been colleagues for however many years before I retired, and close friends as well. Did you get the Kevin Bacon illusion? 6 degrees of separation, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Okay, so at this point, I think I'd like to quit prattling on and ask and listen to your questions and what you want to talk about. David, is that the format? Does this sound about right?
That would be fine. Thank you very, very much. And I see that Janet has her hand up, so we'll go to her first.
Oh, you're still muted, Janet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be Elisa Sanchez today because I thought she would be here to talk to you.
Yeah.
What is Las Cruces going to do to increase New Mexico history to include what the history really was, and the Hispanics and the Latinos and the minorities that actually live here into the education, the history books and everything?
That is a very good question. And there is critical race theory involved with that question, and how we approach our what we talk about with students, as well as the other topics that I hit on today. Have you looked at the new social studies standards, which are about to be adapted in our state?
Yes.
No.
Okay. I'll do a quick Google search in a minute and see if I can give you a link to those. The standards were revised in about the year 2000, significantly. And then every 10 years they're supposed to be, or 10-year cycle, they're supposed to be looked at in depth. And in 2009, they were looked at oh so briefly and kind of kept going. And then we had a good look at the standards just this past year. And so there's more definite part of our curriculum that involves a recognition of minorities and minority contributions to New Mexico. Now, in New Mexico history specifically, we have always had that question. Although, how many of you are products of New Mexico schools? May I see a show of hands?
What was the question, Bob?
How many of you went to New Mexico schools? You graduated from a New Mexico high school. Yeah, we had back in the day a brief New Mexico history. We did not take on Don Juan de Oñates chopping off the feet of Acoma Indians, though. If that was talked about, it was like, well, let's just keep going, And I think we have a greater recognition now to include topics that are important for people to look at. Slavery is uncomfortable in our country as a whole. The redlining of people trying to buy houses is uncomfortable. To look at those issues. And in New Mexico, we certainly have those same things as well. And so our standards are moving toward more incorporation of that. And it is through new teacher training that those things begin to really take hold. Each of us as teachers teach to the standards that we are asked to. And so there is a major curriculum revision going on right now within the history and social science departments. But that does not necessarily include retraining of English teachers, for instance. But So Janet, am I answering your question? What we have in Las Cruces is a board that wants this to happen and sets policies and says, we want this to be taught in our schools. And then it is the day-to-day working out of it is what happens with the administrators and the people in charge of implementing those decisions. And so where the board sets policy, the day-to-day activity and the making sure citizens contact the school district and say, what are you doing for inclusion? May I see what lessons or what the curriculum is involving minorities and New Mexico. And by doing that, then our administrators get to stop and think about, well, what is it that we're teaching? How is this working? And so I've kind of gone around your question. As a school board, yes, very supportive. But then in terms of the implementation, school board sets policy, and then the school district is supposed to carry it out. And then we can simply ask, are you doing what we asked you to do?
Are you asking them?
Yes, we are on a statewide level. And then I can tell you that Dr. Wendy Miller Tomlinson was one of the people on the state committee that revised the social studies standards. So in Las Cruces, we definitely have a sense that these things are important. How things go down to every single classroom is another story. Brief anecdote, a teacher was floating into my classroom because we didn't have enough building space or they were doing something. And I would exit my classroom because it was his classroom during that time period. But one time I went in to get something out of my desk and heard the line about, well, slave owners would not beat and abuse their slaves because that was their property. And that would be counterintuitive to what they wanted to do. And I thought to myself, he has been taught the big lie of slavery, that he has accepted the what is it called, the Southern rewriting of history for the Civil War, the lost cause, that belief system. And it was his classroom. I just grabbed what I was going for and left. But I thought to myself, we have to go beyond what we were taught as children, because I'm sure he had heard that line as a child. So.
Well, Lisa, who is not here, do you happen to know her, Elisa Sanchez?
While we're waiting, Janet, I could provide you a link to the new standards, new social studies standards. They are excellent.
Okay, so her
It's a nice
are being answered then.
Well, at the state level, as Bob was saying, it's the State Department of Education, shares their expectations with the school districts, and then the school districts and through their boards are responsible for implementation and accountability. But the standards themselves, I think, are really quite good. It's about a 90-page document, but it's worth perusing.
Okay.
Yeah. You are entertained by my dogs, were you?
Yeah.
Could you hear them?
Okay.
They are 3 and they are rather large. And I'll tell you, there's something going on out there, and it could involve a bunny rabbit.
Okay. Well, Bob, I have 5 dogs, so it's music to my ears to hear yours barking. So
very good. It's all I can do now, not to show you a picture of them.
yeah.
What else? Thanks.
So, well, could I follow up on Janet's question very quickly? And I don't want to dominate things, group, so don't be shy. But what kind of pressure is the school board getting here in Las Cruces to protect the sensitivities of little white boys and girls?
Thank you. That was the metaphor I used earlier, wasn't it? If not actual event. Well, at my first board meeting, when we were in the public comment period, I'm not sure if how many of you have attended board meetings? Give me a little waving hand. Back in the 1940s, way to go, Jack. No. As a teacher, are any of you involved in education as teachers, or
Formally,
as a teacher, I would attend board meetings and do the public comment part to talk with board members. I would be on committees. I would call them about issues that were important to me. I was definitely engaged in that. And the other side of that coin is there are a number of other people who were very engaged in that issue. My very first board meeting, the very first public comment person was attacking something over a total misunderstanding. When I was running for school board, I had talked about going beyond the mythos, the mythic elements of our childhood teaching about, for instance, George Washington. We're talking cherry tree and axes. That mythos is an important part of who we are as a culture. That's the foundation belief, but that's not where we stop. We teach critical thinking skills about history, so that we are not just saying, aren't we the best ever, American exceptionalism, but that we can look at ourselves, warts and all, and discover the real history of who we are, and through that learn and make ourselves better. Because that is the ultimate objective in education, is to confront a change in a child. It could be algebra, that's mind altering, right? And so whatever you're engaging them in, make them look at it, take it into themselves, see where they can grow and learn from it. As an English teacher, I had such an opportunity that way, because I got to choose much of the literature that I taught students. Okay, did I follow up there, David? Or anybody else a question about what Janet has been asking? Good question. I will look and see if I can find the new state standards. I just did a quick Google search, and it's the June 2009 standards that came up when I just did a look a second ago. And so I need to find the ones that are in draft right now to share with you. I will email those to David, and I bet he can share them. Anybody else, a question or follow-up question? Oh, you're muted now, David.
Okay.
There we go.
I was saying I'm not shy. I am stupid, but I'm not shy. So my question is, where do you think our schools in Las Cruces truly excel? What can we be proud of as a community in terms of the public education we provide our youth?
That's a good and broad, very precisely broad question. Thank you. Because the format or background to that question is our scores on various assessments, and then the pointy finger right to the camera that says, look, New Mexico, you are 40 something in this and in that. What's going on? And there are systemic parts and things that that make up some of what's going on there. The low test scores, the need for accelerated or additional learning, especially in early grades, to make sure kids can read. Those are critical things that we're working on. What is it? By grade 3, if a child does not have the reading skills, you can see the future is not going to be bright. Because in grades kindergarten 1 and 2, kids are learning to read. And then from grade 3 on, they are reading to learn. And so if they have not mastered the reading itself, then it is very difficult to do the other learning. The state legislature this year has provided optional time, and it is at a school and parents' choice for 3 additional weeks in June try to make up some of that deficit, if you will. And it's geared at just K through 5, because it's absolutely critical that kids learn to read at that point. And I've been on the board just since January, and have discovered although I had taught for 34 years, there's a lot of stuff about school board memory that I need to learn. Capital outlay, for instance, I've got to get all that information down, which was not related to what I was doing as a teacher, but we need to be transparent with what's going on with the money in the district. And so the legislature is allowing schools to choose to have that extended learning time for kids. And then I want to back off and see what our assessments are and what the truth is about how kids are learning and what is it that they are learning. Are you aware that I believe the entire state of California, maybe just the UC system, is no longer requiring SATs or ACT tests as a function of admission? You've seen that? Yeah, and we know that colleges like Bard or more liberal universities and colleges for a long time have not put as much stock into those test scores as others do. And I firmly believe that you cannot boil a child down into a single alphanumeric representation, that you cannot do that and capture what that kid is doing, that there's very definitely a cultural and historical bias into how we are assessing children that way. And so I think we are, and maybe COVID has made this apparent to us, at a seed change for how we assess children and what we do in terms of how we are figuring out, analyzing, recording what a child has learned. And so I've talked around your question, David. I think we need to think again about how we assess kids. And we need to see that there is a greater measure than simply an SAT or ACT or a standardized score, while also recognizing that if we don't do everything we can to promote early childhood reading skills, that we're missing the boat. David said I taught advanced placement English in his introduction, and I've consulted for the College Board for the past 15 or so years, almost 20 years, teaching teachers how to teach advanced placement English. And I teach summer institutes and conferences during the year. This summer I'll be talking into my computer for 4 or 5 weeks to teachers about how to do AP English. I am invested in a test that measures how well kids can do, and then had great success getting kids to pass that test. But we have to recognize that it's not the only measure. Anybody else follow up on that? Yes, Susan?
Oh, I have a different question. Well, but it's somewhat related. I'm a retired teacher, and I taught primary grades. And since I'm actually a snowbird, I'm only here part of the year, but I have volunteered for 7 or 8 years in a kindergarten class at Conley Elementary School. And very honestly, there's a segment of the kindergartners who clearly are not prepared to be kindergartners. And I'm just wondering, I very strongly believe that from age, 2 to 5, even birth to 5 is absolutely critical. And I'm just wondering, is the school board looking at providing more services to kids below the age of 5? Because I feel like if they don't come prepared for kindergarten, even though, I was very impressed with the teacher, and there was an 8 in the kindergarten class, and I was working with kids who, didn't know their letters and, sounds and things like that. They're starting from such a lower level that I'm just wondering, what the school board is doing, because then if you look at the graduation rate in high school, I don't think it's that good.
You can trace it right back. Yes, yeah. Thank you for that question. When a kid shows up in kindergarten not knowing his or her colors, well, that's where you start, right? And so you've nailed it on the head. That, you know, if they don't know their letters and they don't have a sound symbol correspondence at all, then that's where you start. And most kindergartners, I would think the majority have not had the parenting where they have read and memorized books before they got to kindergarten. I know in reading to my own nieces that if I tried to skip some parts, they knew what the words were on that page and wanted you to read the book, right? And so so much of it boils down to that. There is, I've been on the board since January, and I've had one briefing with Maria Arteaga, who is head of early childhood ed and Head Start in our district. LCPS is among a handful of schools in that Head Start is actually part of Las Cruces Public Schools instead of a separate entity in our community. And so in that way, the teachers who are in the Head Start program are being taught being paid teacher wages as opposed to other things. I think it's a good program that we're having. And what I also learned from her is that we've got, what were the numbers? About 8,000 kids in the 3 to 5 range who would qualify for the programs, for the Head Start and early childhood ed programs, and about 6,000 something who are not receiving that help. And so it goes down to early identification of students and their needs, and then how to incorporate, how to get them into the schools, into the Head Start programs to make sure it works. Back to COVID, back to American Rescue Plan, back to CRISA funds and the other things. We have been given a great opportunity right now with early childhood ed. A lot of federal dollars passed right through our legislature in New Mexico to address early childhood education. And in fact, I think they have opened a head of early childhood ed as a separate entity. You know, we have university level, I'm in charge of this person in the state, K through 12. I think they are opening an early childhood ed program to make sure that is addressed specifically. And so I guess the long and the short of it is I don't know, but I know I've started to been briefed on what it is. They are talking about the idea of building hubs for early childhood ed so that we can address those 6,000 kids currently who are not receiving services. They're also talking about expanding early childhood ed services at many different schools. And so we're looking at which way makes more sense. If you don't have a critical mass of special ed kids in that school, then you don't get some services. So it makes sense in some ways to construct hubs for early childhood ed. But then in others, you want to maintain that early childhood, elementary school, walk to school type of thing. Conley has mostly kids who walk to school, right? And the demographics there are not the most affluent part of our city.
Right.
And so it's, so I said earlier, I don't know, is the bottom line. But I think that from what I have learned, I think we're moving in the right direction with early childhood ed. And my belief is that the legislature has given us some money to actually address that concern. Susan, you said you've been doing it 8 or 9 years?
Pardon?
You've been volunteering 8 or 9
Well,
years?
I volunteered before COVID. I stopped with COVID, but before that, I think it was 8 years that I was in Conley as a volunteer, just once a week for a morning. But it was wonderful. The children were fantastic. But having taught in other districts in other states, I really saw some of the deficits that some of the kids came with. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I say I don't know, I have a learning curve to do here on a lot of things. And what I believe is that when a board member says, I'm very interested in early childhood ed and what programs you are doing, then the administration has to gather that information for us and say, oh, here's what we are doing. And so by definition, if the wheel squeaks in that direction, something good might come from it. And so it's definitely a top priority of mine. As an English teacher, I just know that if we don't have kids who know how to read, their lives are diminished.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Jack Welch, you had your hand.
Yes. Before we complete the discussion, I'd like to change this topic just a little. I attended the Zoom meeting on Tuesday early evening of Ms. Tomlinson and Mr. Han at Central Office, and some of the things they will be proposing to the school board, and maybe this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Bob, did you observe that meeting?
We had one on Tuesday night for teachers and staff, and one on Wednesday for parents. So I attended the Tuesday night meeting.
Yeah.
It's about the calendar options.
Yes, and actually I interpreted they're contemplating restructuring the curriculum to include such things as life experience, experiential learning. They used the example if a kid has a summer job that has educational implications, that they might get some credit for it, including agriculture work. It's just the impression that I got, they're thinking of just revamping the entire school curriculum. I think they have some funding to do that. And they were very enthusiastic about the potential that they have. And I would just like to have your comments on it, please.
The calendar proposals that they've put forth include 2 additional weeks of instruction for kids. So teachers would go from 183-day contract to 193-day contract. Children, and I think, would gain 7 out of those 10 additional days, and professional development would be with the others. So school would start on one of the calendars the first week of August instead of the 3rd week of August, and it would end the end of May. And on another calendar, they would balance the holidays so that you had 2 weeks off in October, 2 weeks off at spring break. The school year would start the middle of July and then go to the end of May. And so those are the 2 calendars, as well as staying on the traditional calendar. And the idea is those days would be designated for different aspects. There would be a service learning day. There would be a day of arts and performing arts, visual arts type of integration. They would try to have thematic days that would enhance the education, as opposed to just simply, here are 10 more days. Now, if I had 10 more days, I would love to analyze literature with my kids. Those would have been fine days for me. But the idea is we don't want to just continue, to add more days to their school year, but to designate them and try to be responsive to alternate learning things like you talked about. I am getting
I kept using the term experiential learning.
Yes, and yes, and I'm getting about a 98% negative feedback from parents and teachers on changing the calendar. They are, so many parents and teachers as well are saying, if I can't teach them in 180 days, I don't know what 190 days is going to do. My stress level is not to here; it's been up to here since before COVID. And what are you doing? And so I don't know what the result is going to be. We're going to have results from a survey on Monday, I think, polling teachers and I believe parents, but I'm not sure how it's working, on what their opinions are about extending the contract. But the phone calls I've received, the emails I've received have all been very much against it. I would be hard pressed to have that many people being against it and me saying, well, I know better than you do. I don't have a dog in this race. I don't. As a teacher, I just told you if I'd had 10 more days, I would have loved to read some more poetry. You know, let's write another essay. It would have been fun with me. And had we had days that were designated towards service learning projects, I sponsored the Amnesty International at Cruces for 30 years, the GSA. Those things would have been right into what I did in extracurricular types of things as well. But I don't have a dog in this race. We'll look and see what people are feeling, and then if they are, my thinking and my, I don't know that it's a fear, but expectation is that it's going to be overwhelmingly negative at the board meeting this Tuesday. And my suggestion to our administration would be, we need to sell this. We can't force it down the throats. Our legislators have tried to do a good thing for us. Here are some additional days. We're providing money, but if anything crammed down a throat, it's not going to work. So, thank you for that question, Jack.
Okay. Well, with that, our hour is up, but I want to close by thanking you again, Bob, for being with us today, but even more so for your years of dedication to the youth of our city and your continued dedication to them through your school board work. I also want to give a shout out to all of the teachers out there, to Susan and Jack was a teacher in higher education, VJ in higher education, and we have a lot of former teachers at all levels in our congregation. And in my humble opinion, I think that our teachers, especially our teachers in the public school years, the primary, the middle, and high school years, are the most important professionals in our society. And I really think that our society really, I wish would accept that fact and give them the respect and the financial rewards that they truly deserve for what they do for all of us. So anyway, thank you all for being here. And Charlie, if you can stay on the line for just a few minutes so we can conduct some roundtable business. Next week, we will be looking at some simulation software that our speaker is going to use to look at examining various policy initiatives to address the climate crisis. So it should be an interesting session. So see you all next week, and have a good week.
I would like you to send me that link for the updated curriculum.
Yeah.
I will send that to David and ask him to forward it. It was a delight to talk to you. I appreciate you all very much.
Thank you.
I think I recognize some faces from PVA and other places. So, all right. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
So long, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.